Welcome, everybody. We're so excited that you're here with us for continuing the journey of the Love is Louder webinar series. I am your host for the month of August. My name is Rachel Ward, they, them. I'm the team leader and minister for Gender and Sexuality Justice Ministries at the national setting of the United Church of Christ, which is a part of Justice and Local Church Ministries. Nurture the Soul is a weekly webinar sharing practical, educational, innovative, and formational resources and engaging critical topics for local churches and people of faith. Together, we can bring our church and our community and the world towards the world that God imagines for all of us. So join us every Thursday at 3:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time for Nurture the Soul. And dear community, as we are a collective, this work is made possible by our shared commitment to justice in the world. So please consider donating towards the annual fund of the United Church of Christ by texting UCC to 41444. And thank you. So welcome back. You have been journeying with us, and we are so grateful. And if this is the first time you're joining us live, guess what? It's okay. The other episodes are already on YouTube, waiting for you to visit them with all the special links and information in the info box on YouTube. So you can still take this journey with us if you've just found your way to the Love is Louder series. We are encouraging you to take yourself to YouTube afterwards and watch all these things and share with your friends. So I'm going to be with you until next Thursday, which is the conclusion of this series. And we've been doing this Love is Louder series to kind of help prepare us for the ways that we seek justice and care for one another and love out loud for our queer community. So to close us out next week will be Dr. Roberto Che Espinoza, who I am so excited to kind of hold us at the end of this road and open us up wider to really talk about how we bring belonging and beloved community into action with one another, where you are in your context. So please be with us next Thursday. But for this moment, before we kick off with my dear friend who I'll introduce in just a moment, I want to invite Reverend Noah back to share something with you you can take action on right now. Noah, will you share with us?
Yeah, thank you, Rachel. My name is Noah Brewer-Wallen. I go by he and they pronouns, and I'm the Assistant Director of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion for the Southern New England Conference. And I want to invite you to join us for our Justice Summit on Trans and Non-Binary Belonging in the Church, which will take place on October 7th and has a fully online option. So we hope that you'll join us from wherever you are. We will start and end our day together in worship, where we will be led by a team of trans, non-binary, and queer people, and hear from keynote preachers Reverend Miguel Garcia, the Faith Work Director at the National LGBTQ Task Force, and Reverend Tyler Connolly, the Conference Minister for the Central Pacific Conference. In the morning, you'll have the option of hearing from a panel of trans and non-binary people sharing their experiences and identities. If you are relatively new to conversations about and with trans and non-binary people, this session is for you. Your other morning option is joining Reverend Dr. Katrina Roseborough-Marsh, the new Executive Director of the Open and Affirming Coalition, for a conversation about the theologies that ground open and affirming covenants, what it means to be ONA today, and her vision for an intersectional ONA movement. In the afternoon, you again have two workshop options, one about practical steps congregations can take to become places of trans and non-binary belonging, and the other about how to proclaim progressive Christian values in the public square, to share messages of LGBTQ affirming theology and counteract anti-trans, anti-LGBTQ policies and rhetoric. During lunch, you will have the opportunity to join an affinity group to reflect with people of similar identities about your experiences of the day and in the church. The affinity group options are trans and non-binary people, loved ones of trans people, cisgender, gay, lesbian, bisexual, queer people, cisgender, straight people, people whose churches are considering becoming open and affirming, and youth of all gender and sexualities. And youth are also welcome to participate in any of the other groups. Again, The Justice Summit on Trans and Non-Binary Belonging in the Church will be on October 7th from 10 a.m. to 5 p.m. Eastern, and you are invited to fully participate online. The registration deadline is September 16th, and information about how to register is posted in the chat. If you have any questions, I welcome hearing from you by email, which is also in the chat, and I hope to see you at the Justice Summit on October 7th.
Thank you so much, Reverend Noah. And again, those informational links will be placed in the chat. And if you are a registrant, which you are because you are here with us, you'll get an email from us too. And we'll ensure that Reverend Noah's email and the link to register is in that follow-up from today's webinar for you all. So I'm really, really excited. Once again, I've been excited all month long because this has been such a joy to host and such a wonderful conversation that we've been continuing and journeying with together. I'm excited to be with my friend, my colleague, my co-conspirator in this work, Kevin Miguel Garcia, who, they, them pronouns, is a digital pastor, spiritual recovery coach, mystic theologian, sought after speaker, and the host of the podcast, A Tiny Revolution. Kevin holds a Master of Practical Theology from Columbia Theological Seminary, which is also where I graduated from. We are both coming from Atlanta today, and Kevin coaches clients from all over the world through deconstruction, coming out, cultivating spiritual practices to promote resilience, solidarity, and self-compassion. Kevin is the author of Bad Theology Kills, and their new book, which I highly recommend checking out, is called What Makes You Bloom, Cultivating, hey, there it is, Cultivating a Practice with Your Divine Self, is coming out this January through Broadleaf Books. So Kevin has been doing this work of spiritual nourishment and discovery and narrative rewriting and compassion for a very long time. And I thought it would be really important for us to kind of come up for a little bit of air and talk about something that's really, really important. And that is the spiritual self that is in this conversation around queer justice and queer flourishing, and honestly, flourishing for all of us, all of us. So Kevin, thank you so much for spending time with me.
Treat to be here. I'm ready to just gab and goop and just be light and also deep. Light and deep, you know?
Yeah, we're going to do it. So I've been asking all of our guests this kind of first question to ground folks in who you may be and what brings you to the work. So I'd love for you to share, Kevin, a little bit about yourself and what brings you into this passion of helping queer folks journey and process through their spiritual trauma and really discovering or rediscovering who they are, who God has created them to be, divine creator has made them to be. Yeah. Share with us a bit about that.
So, like many folk, grew up in a good Christian home. Which is how all testimonies start out, I think, at least if you're queer. But yeah, I won't give you the whole backlog of everything, but how I came into this work in particular was I had left missionary world when I came out. I was 24. This was summer 2015. Came out, got kicked out of missionary world, was living in a basement and sharing a room with another fully grown human. Who I love that man, very, very good, but just like, it's very strange to share a room with your best friend when you're 27, you know? At least it was for me at that point. But that was the time that I started getting very serious about figuring out, okay, so like, God, I followed you out of the closet. Jesus, I took you at your word. And you said I would do greater things. And so I'm like, if it's going to be great, it has to be greater than this because I have to be myself wherever I'm going. And here I am in this crappy little basement apartment. And I feel like I'm abandoned by you. But it was like from the moment that I came out online, I found myself working with other queer advocacy groups and other LGBTQ Christian organizations to tell people like, hey, there's more than one way to be a Christian. You do not have to be a hateful prick. in order to be Christian. In fact, you should try doing the opposite. It works quite well if you think about it. But I did the conference thing for a while, and then thank you for the little laugh emoji. By the way, if you guys enjoy something as we're going along, put those in there because we see them and it actually helps us know how the people are reacting to what we're saying. It's really helpful. Thank you. So yeah, I found myself just like in the middle of queer advocacy and specifically queer Christian advocacy. So I got to cut my teeth with both people who were like Black Lives Matter organizers and city organizers and labor organizers who were also organizing within churches, trying to teach people the power of organizing in order to create change. And that's why I got really passionate about that. Fast forward, I'm in seminary, and it gets to a point where I recognize that the people that I am most passionate, not even most passionate, but the people I find that I'm helping the most in my work are folks who may never walk through the doors of a church again, but they still want to have some kind of spiritual practice, and they have religious family or they have Christian families. And so at some point, they're going to be in proximity to that, and they don't want to be triggered by it anymore. And they want to have relationships with their family, even if their spirituality becomes more expansive than what their family might. And so in my work, what I do with people is help teach spiritual practices that help connect them to that sense of some people call it the Christ, the inner part of you that is love itself, that is incorruptible, because that's what I was seeking for myself. And so when I was in seminary, I leaned more heavily into my meditation practice. I leaned more heavily into my yogic practice, at the same time getting a classic seminary education. And I really became passionate about being a person of, in practical theology land, we call it a person of multiple religious belonging. And I finally felt able to just be okay with the fact that my relationship to Jesus, my relationship to Jesus is going to be very, very different than most Christians. And I'm okay with that, because at the end of the day, love and grace is not contingent upon us sharing an identity marker. It is contingent upon us being willing to love one another. What a concept. And what I learned is like, that's really the beginning. And so much of my work is learning how to love myself so that I can show other people how to do it for themselves, if we really boil it down. But yeah, I found myself here through something A Course in Miracles says is the teacher of God teaches that which they want to learn. And I wanted to learn how to get into deeper spaces with spirit, and like how to actually stay in that connection with the beloved in my everyday life, and not just when I need something or when I'm having a crisis, but having he walks with me and talks with me and tells me I am his own kind of love. And I do, that's the very Baptist of me to, cite that verse, not in that verse, that hymn.
The hymn. Now it's in my head. Now
he walks with me and he
Mhm.
tells me. You get a 4-part barbershop on that. It is now that's a song. That's a song.
It's a good one. It's a good one. As you can tell, Kevin is just the right dose of medicine for where we are in our journey right now.
God, I hope so. Apparently y'all been on the bluesy train, huh?
We've done some deep diving. And so now I think I really want for the folks who are with us to know that we've been talking about the difference between welcoming and open and affirming. And we've been talking about the intersection of what happens in educational institutions and religious colleges, and that there is a different way to widen the doors and support queer groups who may not have space in their high school or may not have space in their college to meet anymore, and the ways that we can utilize our space. But there's also this very important component that I really believe does tie us together in a loving way, is that we're siblings to one another. Here in the UCC, we really believe that we are siblings in Christ, and that our greatest covenant is seeing each other and loving each other and taking care of each other. And so I wanted us to spend time this episode really talking about that religious multiplicity of how that can look and feel, and how that is different for every single person and the needs of what they may have. And this series is all about deep listening. And Kevin, you do a lot of deep listening in your work. And so I'm curious right now, in the ways that you're holding space for your clients, for queer folks who are journeying with you, in group settings and one-on-one settings, what are you seeing and hearing around how they may be coping or not coping with what's going on, and the needs that queer folks have in this moment? If you don't mind sharing some of that.
Yeah. I think what I've noticed the most is that when something big happens on the national stage, it really does have a ripple effect into the lives of marginalized people. And like, not surprising, most of my clients are queer and or trans. And as all the anti-trans rhetoric like ramped up over the summer, the Bud Light debacle with Dylan Mulvaney, with all of the, it wasn't even boycotting, it was violence on an edifice. There was like, this is what we want to do to trans people. And I'm just like people think you're shooting beer cans, but you're not. Like, we know what your intention is, the message you're trying to send. I think there was for especially the top of this year, like through this, there's been a lot more anxiety that's come up for folks. And I think my work has been about like, what is it to hold space for my anxiety and my fear? And what is it also at the same time to press into both? Like, my advice from my teacher was, when things are good, double down on your practice. And when things are bad, double down on your practice. Like, in the good times, lean into the good feelings. And in the bad times, try to lean really, really hard into the thing that's going to keep you grounded. And I think when you are somebody who comes from a marginalized community, and if you're especially trans folks, there's a hard time with working on embodiment practices, because a lot of times we've been taught, like queer folks and people just in the West in general, but especially queer and trans folks, we've been taught how to be abhorrent, like hate our body. We've been taught to like make it a separate entity, make it like the object of our sin nature, rather than our partner, rather than the temple that it is meant to be. And it is not even meant to be the temple that it is. And so what I've noticed is that when people can take a little bit of time each day, and this is gonna, like, people, like, this is probably the most annoying thing I'll say this entire thing. If you spend time meditating, you're probably going to feel better. And I don't mean to come across as condescending, but everybody knows that, right? It's like the most time-tested thing in the entire world, and we don't want to do it because we don't really know, and there's some part of our ego that has been convinced that either A, it doesn't really work, or it won't work for us, or B, we don't deserve to feel good. And so I like to say, I'm just like, well, what is it? Well, I don't know. Like, if you don't know, try it out. If you don't want to do 5 minutes, do 1 minute. What would 1 minute of just counting, like, because already I can feel myself, because I can, I ramp myself up all the way up into something, and I got to talk myself back down. But there's so many small, tiny little things we can do to learn, A, how to regulate the soft animal of our body, if you will, who's trying to love what they love and do who they do and deal with everything and protect us. There's a way for us to love our body back. And I think it's through what I call, like, I teach people like what I call a living practice. And it's just like, it's movement, it's stillness, it's finding something inspiring to do, and it's finding inspiring people to be around. That's it. And it can be very, very simple. But the thing is, like, again, like when you are traumatized, when you're learning how to do embodiment stuff, is that trauma lives in the body. And then as you're doing it, this stuff comes up, feelings come up. And that's why it's important to take it slow and be easy about it, and not try to like force your way through healing all in one meditation session. You know, we try to get like, it's like, we think that we should be over our pain by now, but I'm just like, but you haven't even begun to do the work of letting go of it. And that's okay. There's no judgment in it. It's just that like, you shouldn't be over it. You should be feeling as bad as you do. And what would you like to do about it? There is a way. There is peace that passes understanding. And that's what I also think I've noticed is that for those of us for whom a relationship with Jesus is important, it transforms us into actual disciples from where I'm sitting. Like, this is my thing. I love Jesus. Jesus is my brother and my teacher and my friend. And I followed him out of the closet, and I'm following him right now, trying to do all this other stuff. It is annoying. The fact that I love Jesus is the most annoying thing about me, I think. Because if I could let go of that, I think, you know, in my mind's eye, I was like, I could just go be a vaguely spiritual person. But for me, Jesus was the one who introduced me to God. And Jesus is still the pathway through which I connect with God. And I don't have to justify it anymore. Jesus is what helps me thrive. And I don't have to impose that on anybody. I don't even have to use the words of Jesus. I just have to talk about what the practices do for my life. Because that's really what I think is the most beneficial, is not even trying to fix your beliefs about something, but what are you going to do every day to connect with peace? What are you going to do to connect with that wisdom that is deep within you, the Christ within? That's the question. And the people who allow themselves the time, even the smallest amount of intention, can go a long way. You give yourself the smallest bit of space, amazing things tend to happen. Yeah. Does that answer the question?
Yes, it does. and it bridges us into a little bit more deeper of those practices. I think it's worth saying that work I have done and research that I have done in my own seminary journey, I coined this term called living death, which is what I think that queer people experience throughout their daily living.
Yes.
And living death is,
I know
like,
exactly what you're talking about already. Keep going.
this
Sorry.
like experience of like death by 1,000 paper cuts, and living death can equate to someone not being here. It's a flare signal that our grief can encapsulate and hide from everyone to see that we actually really do need care and affection and space. And for those who are willing and have that deep, intimate connection with Christ, with God, with Spirit, with church, need to have a space to be able to walk back in and then be reminded that they were never really ever kicked out. That was an action of institutional injustice that has nothing to do with the framework of the living, breathing.
Nothing to do with reality. Everything to do with somebody else's idea of a club. Yeah. So I'm like, oh, Kevin's. Let me not go off, because I could go off. Kevin's practices and what Kevin is talking about is really important, because no matter if you're queer or not queer, we live in a society that thrives on us being disembodied people across our personhood. And for marginalized folks, across multiple layers of margin too, right? If you're thinking intersectionally, if you're a queer, Black, trans woman, you're continuing to layer and layer. You're disembodied in a way that could feel impossible to liberate. Yeah. But these practices of being able to give yourself permission that you never needed to be still, and to look at your body and say, I love you, and you are a gift, and you are of me, is in itself a practice. And so a large component of working through
what I'm talking about with Living Death is really discovering your narrative. Kevin and I we both know Dr. Shanika Walker-Barnes, and I think I have said this woman's name in literally every webinar or conversation I've been in, but she said something to the first time I heard her speak, it just changed my life for the better. She opened her mouth and she said, "Who told you that you had to fit?" That was the first line of a talk she gave in 2018 when I saw her.
Ooh, I got the goosebumps
right
from that.
And I realized that that the gut feeling that we have as queer people and non-queer folk, but I'm talking to queer people specifically, and I'm asking non-queer folk to listen. The gut feeling we have when someone says that we don't belong, that God didn't create us this way, that we can't be in this church, is the reaction of the imago Dei within us saying, I never made you to fit in a certain way or category of frame. I made you so you could be expansive and fluid and beautiful and a butterfly that continues to transform and take shape. And that gut feeling that reacts for us is the nudge to say, something's not right, something's not useful here.
Right.
And meditation and still practices and working along the lines, even journaling can be meditation, right?
I make my students do it. Like, you have to.
It's something that we've been doing across different faith practices, across different cultures for decades upon decades, because it helps you have moments of liberation that equates to practices of getting free for the rest of your life.
Yes, you're practicing the feeling of what does it feel to be free? Because here's the thing, it's like, if you can get in here, feel the love here, and if you can get free from shame here, everything else is possible. If you can imagine a life free from the shame that you're carrying, if you can imagine a life free from the anxiety that you're holding, if you can imagine a life where you have forgiven yourself for whatever it is you think that you did wrong, especially when you were just trying to survive, for most of us, right? Then that's what meditation practice is. That's what daily practice does, is I'm practicing my liberation. I'm practicing getting free. I'm practicing what does it feel like to not have an undue emotional and psychic burden that I place upon myself, on top of already living in a world that's hard to live in. Late capitalism is really doing a number on us. It is hard, especially if you're in North America. It's hard to be here. It's hard to be in a place where just like so many of us around us are suffering. And so like it's imperative to find the things that bring you to peace, to that remind you that feeling you're having, where just like, you know, your soul is saying what the thought that's it, like my little story, just for a second, it won't be long, I swear. I went and preached a sermon a couple of weeks ago at this church, and half the people loved it, half the people hated it, and said some really nasty things online. And for some reason, that's all I can remember about that experience now, is that feeling. And like, I'm just like, why can't I let this go? Why can't I? And there was a part of me that was like, oh, because the fact that someone called me a heretic for telling them that like maybe, and the thing is, they didn't actually like specify the heresy. They just called me a heretic, and I'm like, well, which part? But like, it's like, there's a party, like it's like, you don't belong here. You are a poison to this place. I'm like, I mean, I got invited, but okay. Like, and so it's one of those things where just like some, like that anger that comes up, that like offense is actually something that to pay attention to, because that's usually saying, all right, well then I don't have to accept that half love anymore. I don't have to accept that kind of rejection anymore, because I know who I am. Yeah.
And there's two things that you talked about, and I think that they'll really help us lead into this third question point. As human beings, psychologically, when we look at psychology and study and read some of that material, and also from a gospel perspective, a belief perspective, survivorship is not thriving.
Mm.
Doing enough in order to survive or to make it through for a long time is not the birthright that we were given in our bodies.
Mm-hmm.
And our bodies are so critical to resurrection moments that we get to have, where we're
Mm-hmm.
resurrected into what was placed in us to begin with. The knowing and the gut and the intuition of knowing who I am and who I belong to, not in a possessive way, but in a created and creating way, in a belonging way.
Yeah, the family which I belong to.
That is one of the most difficult, spiritual, traumatic narratives to work through. And I know we have to continue to peel back the layer that surviving is not our birthright. Thriving and flourishing is our birthright as queer people. And because we want to thrive and flourish, we want that because we want you to thrive and flourish with us too. It's an invitational, unconditional love. It is the framing of love is louder and love out loud is that we want to flourish together. We want you to see us so that you can see you. Because sometimes these projections that we're hearing are projections because also you have been told that you can't feel. You have been told that you don't belong.
Come on now.
You have been told.
Say it.
And so we can take in these practices and embody them every day, because that is a part of practicing freedom, is embodying every day, is waking up and choosing. And one of the things that Kevin's book, which they so lovingly held up for you a minute ago, is about self-compassion. There's this component of self-compassion that helps us internally do that work so that we can externally mirror and do that work. And so I'd really love for you, Kevin, to kind of talk about why self-compassion matters for queer folks, and what is a practice right now that you're really finding nourishing for you around self-compassion.
Self-compassion is the practice. That is life. And the thing, like, if you can recognize that the love that you give to yourself is in fact the love of God, like that's how you get it. You give it to it's this weird, delicious paradox of the loving words you say to yourself are the loving words that are coming from God's lips. Every single time that you do something kind for yourself, that is I think, the loving consciousness, that is love within you being made manifest. That's God to me. And so when I say self-compassion, I'm like talking about like, this is the default. Like this, like a lot of people think that the default is to treat yourself poorly, to talk to yourself like you're a piece, to talk to yourself like you are just the worst scum of the earth, and that I am lucky that God has chosen me. I'm like, that's how I used to think about it. And that's not the case. We are not sinners saved by grace. We are God's children, period. And if we're saved from anything, we're saved from a small life. We're saved from thinking we have to be perfect according to the world's standard and not love's standard. And love's standard is merely willingness to receive. And why do we have such a hard time receiving? Because we don't think we deserve it. We don't think we deserve to feel good. And so I talk about like self-love and self-compassion, kind of just like, it was like, it's all one big thing. Your whole life is one big practice. There's a lot of people, like we've been taught, like, well, I have my work life and I have like my spiritual life, and then I have my friendship life, and then I have my love life, and your life is one life. You think that you have different compartments, but you just have a web of relationships. It's all one life. And so if you're suffering in one area, It makes sense that you're suffering in all areas, because what does the good book say? If, one part of the body suffers, whole body
Yes.
suffers.
Mm-hmm.
And so what are you going to, and the question then becomes like, the act of self-compassion is saying, what am I going to do about that suffering? And so many people, I think, like, we treat religion and we treat our faith as like a way to like bypass our suffering.
Oh yeah, microdose. Microdose the religious framing so that we don't have to deep dive the false story to work through for the true story.
And it's like, I just asked the question. I'm just like, what would it be like to change that? And one practice I've been loving a lot recently, and I've been teaching it, is actually something I borrow from the work of Byron Katie. That's BYRON KAITIE. The book is called Loving What Is. I really enjoy it. But she has a series of questions that she applies. She's like, if you ask these questions, you can escape a lot of the suffering in your life. And so I've been using this with my clients as a way for us to question the beliefs that we carry and that keep coming up in us. And so I redefine a belief the way that Abraham Hicks does, which is a belief is just a thought you keep having over and over and over again. And it's your attention on this thought, which creates the effect. And by effect, I mean the emotion or the feeling behind it. And so if the feeling is, God hates gay people, God thinks queerness, God hates queerness, it's an abomination, hold that thought in your mind. What does that do for you? And for me, like, it produces immense fear. It produces immense feeling of separation. And then I go on to that question. It was like, well, is it true? Maybe even start there. Is it true? And you might say, yes, it is true, because the Bible tells me so. I'm just like, the second question, can you know for certain that it's true? Can you, beyond a shadow of a doubt? And then what do you do when you believe it? I get fearful. And then you ask the question, who would you be without that? Who would you be without the thought? God, queerness, not even saying that queerness is a good thing, but that thought, God hates queer people. What would you do if you didn't have that thought? What would you be doing? And a lot of times it's like, well, I think I'd just be living my life. I think I would just be going normal and not having all this extra anxiety on top of me. And then I would encourage people to say, try on the opposite thought. You don't have to believe it, just try it on. So, what is the opposite of God, hates queer people? God loves queer people. God created queer people. Queerness is a part of the image of God. God loves queer people. Let me hold that thought. What does it do? Well, I can feel my stomach loosen up, first of all. And then it kind of brings a smile to my face, because I'm like, God created me. Like, this is on purpose. I don't know. That sounds pretty cool. Like, it could be true. And for me, I'm feeling a little giddy, maybe. And I'm getting, it's like, could that be true? Is it true? Yes or no? Well, no, the Bible tells me so. Can you absolutely know that it's true? That statement, that that it's absolutely not true? Well, I don't know. Well, how do you believe? What do you feel when you hold that thought? And and who are you with it? Because it's the new thought, so you hold it and just see your life, play it out in your head. And for me, when I'm interrogating thoughts like this and beliefs, and I'm talking about in any situation, whether it's like, my mom is a terrible, mean person and she didn't do the thing I wanted her to do. Is that true? Yes or no? I'm just like, well, maybe not. I'm just like, okay, well, how do you treat her when you believe that thought? How do you treat yourself when you believe that thought? That's another way of framing that third question. How do you treat yourself? How do you treat others? How do you interact with the world when you believe the thought, God hates queer people? God hates, and then if you are a queer person, that the extended thought is, God hates me. It's just and then by extension, change it. God loves me. Try it on. And that's it's a very, very simple thing. It's everyone thinks I got to change my beliefs. No, it's as simple as changing your mind. It's just a thought. And to embody those things, the way that I've been teaching on is so when you find a thought that feels really good, focus on it. Hold it in your mind for at least 15 seconds and let it just sink in. And by the time you're doing that, what you're doing on a biological level is the neural pathways, which have been carved in the opposite direction of I'm a terrible sinner, are now being redirected in this opposite direction. And it takes work a little bit. It feels like work. It doesn't take work. It takes a little focus. It takes a little bit of focus and effort to combat those things. But when you find yourself slipping back into it, you're just like, that's not true.
Mm-hmm.
And you just speak the opposite of what is true. And when it comes up again, you speak the truth again. And then when it comes up again, 15 years later, you say the same thing again. It's like Jesus in the desert. Oof. And that's the thing, is like, it's like when you do like any practice that is kept in earnest, you will see the fruit of it. That's the thing, is that I want to give you a 99% guarantee, that if you just take a little bit of time to question your thoughts, you can escape a load of suffering and be right back in the presence of love where you want to be anyways.
Mm.
And like, to me, that entire process is what I call compassion. It's loving myself enough and looking at my suffering enough and caring enough about my suffering to end it.
Yeah.
To be sweet to myself, to allow myself the space and time to interrogate the false narratives that are keeping me from feeling love, keeping me from God's presence. Because that's really what I want to feel. I want to feel in that love. And this thought's in the way. Get it out of here. Sorry.
No, and no, you're great. Folks are responding in the chat and sending all the emojis.
Mm-hmm.
When I was thinking about how Gender and Sexuality Justice Ministries would emerge from its previous name and presentation as Health and Wholeness, we made the shift to Gender and Sexuality Justice Ministries because it's important that we also love out loud with the work that we are doing and be very bold in professing the work that we're doing. I have always had a deep, deep, deep love for the Good Samaritan parable. And what Kevin is talking about here with thoughts and beliefs, there is a reason why Christ responds with love yourself, love your neighbor as much as you love yourself. And it can kind of seem like the order of events is love your neighbor as you love yourself. But in order to love your neighbor, you have to love yourself.
It is implicit.
It's sneaky, right? Because all of Jesus' parables are sneaky and they're amazing, and I love studying them. But it's so critical that we practice love with ourselves and that we practice self-compassion with ourselves. It's so critical that we really do believe in ourselves, that we believe in wherever you may be on the spectrum of what you believe and think and feel, believing and feeling grounded in this truth that no, we don't have all the answers, and no, we can't be sure of everything, and we can't, but there is still something in me that says that I belong, that I was cultivated and created for this. And so I have to hold on to that, not in like a clinching way, but in a loose, really tender way, almost as if you're holding a baby, a newborn. How do you hold yourself as a baby and a newborn? How can you hold yourself in a loving way so that when it comes time for you on the road where you're seeing everything that's taking place, that you can hold that person who needs your help? And also know that there are other people who have done this work too, this internal work, who are at the end, that you can take this person and relinquish to other care and keep going. Because guess what when we love ourselves, we also respect ourselves and our boundaries, and we invite others in so that we can do the work together. So this component of an embodiment and compassion and really practice of self-care, of spiritual care, is so important. And I'll say one more thing because I am totally a Bible nerd. If you want, it's fun. Jesus does all of these different kinds of actions before Jesus talks, before Jesus delivers a message.
Hello.
And do you know what they are? They are sleeping. They are sitting. They are crying. They are eating. They are angry. They are yelling. They are moving some things. Jesus showcases this range of emotion and marrying of saying, you know, before I can go do this, I need to take care of myself. I need to take a nap. I need to go. I need to go pray.
Napping, forever getting by him dang self. He's like, this is like, because if you're on the spiritual path, and I think those of us who are here might consider ourselves on the spiritual path, it's like, it's one of those things where like the yoke is easy and the burden is light, baby, but it still means that you are co-laboring if you choose to walk this path. There's still things that we need to physically do with our bodies in order that we can cultivate the ground, baby, cultivate the soul, cultivate the heart. And it's not saying like, it's not required for your goodness. It's not required for your salvation. It's not required, period. It's just a question of, do you want to be in the presence? Do you want to be in love? And that's what Jesus was actually talking about. He wasn't telling people how to like, you know, like a better religion. He was telling them a better way. It sounds so like stereotypical. Jesus was teaching people a different way of living. We've not comprehended that. Jesus was teaching a truly alternative lifestyle, if you know what I'm saying. He really was teaching a different way of being human. And we just say that as a platitude, but when we take that seriously, ooh, there's something that can happen.
Jesus also spoke. Oh, we could spend some
Come
of
on
this
now,
time.
Bible. That's the thing about growing up in the South and being a little bit evangelical, is that we have a premium on Bible knowledge just sitting right here, ready to pour out at any moment.
Oh, I mean, it's just if nothing else, if Jesus modeled this love your neighbor as you love yourself in so many ways. And I really think about, you know, I feel like for me, when I think of, right, when we visualize, visualization is a really powerful part of meditation. When I visualize and think about Jesus praying in the Garden of Gethsemane, I think about Jesus meditating. I think about Jesus saying, I gotta go be really still right now because I'm not sure. And you can read all 4 different stories and you can see that there was some doubt. There was this emotional breath and wet of really embracing and discerning how am I in relationship with myself, so that I can go out and be in relationship with these disciples, so that they can go out and be in relationship with their disciples, so that we can go out and be in relationship with each other.
Yes.
So it really does. It's not selfish to begin with the internal. It's actually the most loving act that you can participate in.
It's the first loving act that you must participate in. And something Cynthia Bourgeault says in what is that book? Wisdom Jesus, Cynthia Bourgeault. You can get it for free on Audible, non-spawn. She says that when Jesus says love your neighbor as yourself, what he could also be saying is you must love your neighbor as an extension of yourself. To love your neighbor is to love is to love you. You can't, like, it's like love them because it's you. The suffering they're experiencing, that's you. Don't and like for me, who's like kind of like a non-dualist, very like, I'm just like, oh, like it brings me to tears to know that like there's suffering that can be relieved by just a little bit of intention and love. Let me not cry.
Also Jesus cried a lot too, so you're okay. to get off we're
Get off our
what,
rant.
it's only 4:21. We still have a few minutes to wow and have fun having this conversation. But
Thanks, Liz. Saying let it out in the comments.
Yeah, I'm curious. I really believe that we're in a really fertile soil moment as a church.
Yes.
I really believe that this is a healthy moment for us. And we have a lot of choices and decisions to make about how we care for ourselves in this fertile soil moment. And so I'm wondering, Kevin, in the last few moments we have here, what can we be ruminating on and reflecting on? For those of us who are coming today from maybe pastors or congregation members or in some form of faith community, how we can participate in this healing work of loving ourselves so that we can love our queer neighbors and all neighbors well.
It's going to be annoying because it's the same answer I give almost for everything. Keep your practices. And what I mean by that is if you fancy yourself a spiritual leader, if you fancy, and I say this for real. If you fancy yourself a pastor, I'm not saying that you have a job as a pastor. I say you fancy yourself a pastor because you can have a title, but not be a pastor. There are many, many mega church pastors who are not pastors, in my opinion. But that's another discussion for another time. But the thing I wish was kind of emphasized even more, like even in our seminary experience, is actually what are you like connecting with God. Us progressives, we sometimes don't want to talk about like how do you connect with the mystery. We want to very academicize it, but I'm a mystic, right? And my question for those of us who fancy ourselves like trying to create community surrounded by God is, do you know? How's your relationship? How's your walk? And I'm not saying that like you need to like have a quiet time every day or whatever. But like if you know that you're burning out, if you know that you're disconnected, if you know that you are tired, if you know that you're standing up there every Sunday and dialing it in, what are you doing? If you're tired, you need to ask for help. If you are burning out, you've been charged with the care of a community. That is not something that you take lightly. And I think I'm saying this as like as a spiritual teacher myself, who has a big belief in like our karma as teachers, is that it is when Jesus says, woe to you, teachers of the law, for if you make any one of these children stumble, it is bad for you. He's talking to us. Jesus is saying, if you fancy yourself a teacher of God and you are not, and you're causing somebody else to stumble because either you have a crappy theology or a crappy praxis, or you're burning yourself out and just doing it because you think that you have to, no. And I know that I'm not trying to sound like I'm yelling at you. I'm trying to give you a very, very heartfelt invitation back to take care of yourself, if not for your sake, for the sake of the people under your charge. And what I mean by that is you need to go to the therapist. And what I mean by that is you need to go see the psychiatrist, maybe get on some medication. You need to find other pastor friends who understand what it is to walk through what you're walking through. And you need to find somebody who's going to support you and love you, and also is going to call you on your BS. You need that. So to sum all that yelling up, how's your spiritual practice? You need to be doing something every single day to connect with God. Because honestly, that'll also take most of your problems away, to be honest. And you will find solutions to all the problems that you have on the other side of your still breath. You want to have a relationship with God, sit down 5 minutes a day and be quiet. You'd be amazed when God shows up for things like that. 2, mental health, take your meds, go to the therapist, get your friends around you. 3, get people around you who can share in the mission of your church, who can share in the mission of your community. It cannot be centered around your personality.
Yep.
Because if it's centered around just your good personality and your amazing preaching, what happens to that community when you go or you get bored or you burn out?
It dies.
It dies. And so Yeah, I think it's like, maybe it's the new moon in Leo and I'm just very passionate about this, but like, I feel this really, really big call for teachers and preachers and pastors out here. Like those of us who really do fancy ourselves progressives, who are trying to create space for the hurt and the marginalized and the people who we care, like claim to care about. And so I'm saying this from the perspective of like, queer non-binary weirdo in the South. Okay. You owe it to yourself to get free. And how are you going to get free? By practicing freedom. Okay. I think that's everything. I'll keep ranting if you want.
No,
I'm so serious. Go keep your practice.
Yeah.
Go do some yoga. And also take regular time off. Oh my God. Rest.
Yes,
Oh my
please.
God.
Rest is so important. Sabbatical is so important. Sabbath is so important.
That's for
Taking
our
care of
next time
yourself
we
is so
do a
important.
YouTube talk show.
Yeah, I will talk about that.
I feel like you and me really, like, we could get on the line and just like yell about the things we want people to do to help themselves.
We could, and we're yelling at ourselves and we're lovingly talking to ourselves.
I also, yeah, and that's what I was going to say too, is that all this stuff right here is like, I'm saying it to myself. I'm not a perfect practitioner. I'm not a perfect teacher myself. I'm just like y'all. I'm just trying to do my best. So like, don't think that I'm any like better. I just practice a lot or anything.
I want to say this caveat. So practices of freedom is a part of like my queering of practical theology. It was my thesis. And I really believe it's a practice to get free. And that we all have to cultivate this practice for ourselves.
Yes.
And I want you to hear me right now. If you're sitting here listening on this call, we've got 2 minutes. Great. There's so much good stuff happening right now. If you're sitting on this right now in this live or later on the YouTube stream, wherever you are listening, and you're wondering, I don't have a practice. What is my practice? It's okay.
Yeah.
There are no wrong ways to go about finding what feels good to you and what feeds you. And it can always change.
It should change.
And it will change. If you're asking yourself, I don't have anything, I don't know what that is, or you're burnt out from spiritual disciplines like traditional prayer style, or reading a devotional, or even reading the Bible, go outside, take your shoes off, put your feet on the ground. And if you cannot go outside, take your shoes off and put your feet on the ground. Take your hands, take something that you have mobility with, and feel the pulse in your body. That is a practice enough, because you are alive. And the reminder that we are still here and that we have gifts to sow with ourselves and others is a practice that you can do any moment, any day, multiple times a day. Kevin has a book coming out in January that I know you can read more about this conversation that we had. I know it's in the chat, and we are 1 minute away. We're doing great. We'll make sure that you get that information on the email. But we really hope that for queer folks who are listening, that you know, and that you'll begin to look and see and taste differently about the practices that can help remind you that you are so wonderful. And that there is so much becoming yet ahead for you. And for those who are here with us live and later, who are allies, co-conspirators, questioners, journeyers, that you cultivate practices that help you remain open to hearing all those who want to share their stories and their wisdom with one another, so that we can do what? So that we can thrive and flourish and become together. And I think we did it.
Yeah, that's a good period, I think.
if you didn't know, we're really good friends and we know each other very well.
Yeah,
so this was fun.
Like, yeah, me and Rachel went to school together. We've been doing this kind of stuff together. So this is both playtime and also a great honor. So thank you to you, Rachel. Thank you to friends at the UCC for having me. And thank you for everyone here. It's over in the chat. You can find me at thekevingarcia.com. All my stuff is over there. Social media, books, etc. I love you. I love all of y'all.
Hang out with us next Thursday when we end this series, but continue our journey in new ways. Come hang out. We're so grateful that you've been with us. Sending all our love and tenderness to you. See you next week.
Bye, everyone.
Siblings in Christ, if you were moved by this conversation, if what's been offered here has helped enhance your ministry or has nurtured your soul for the journey, please consider donating to the annual fund of the United Church of Christ by texting UCC to 41444. Your support will help to provide programs like this, which are an essential part of our ministries in the United Church of Christ. Thank you for your support. Be blessed on your journey and know that you are not alone. We are holding you in prayer. Amen.